All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining our 1 o'clock session. This session is titled Meeting the Needs of Society 5.0, Leveraging Higher Education's Responsiveness to the COVID Crisis for the Future. And our presenter today is Billie McNamara from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And I will hand it over to Billie.
Hi, everybody. Greetings from the Tennessee State Library in Nashville, which is my second home after UT. Fortunately, the storms have stopped, so hopefully I can stay connected today. And I'm happy to see everyone. I don't want to fill the chat up with all the distractions that might pop up on your screen, but if you want to put in where you're from and why, are you in higher ed? Are you an instructor, administrator, whatever you do, why you're interested in this topic, that would be great for us to sort of get to know each other. I'm going to talk about where we have come from, where we are today, and where we can go in the future. And I want to tell you in advance that copies of my slide presentation in a PDF format and some articles that I recommend for background reading are already uploaded to the Discord space that the conference is using for sharing. And if you don't get them there, you're welcome to email me and I will be happy to share. And I love talking about this because the Society 5.0, Internet of Things, I'm a tech person and I really get excited by this topic. The first thing I want to talk about is what is Society 5.0? What does that mean? If you already know, that's great. You're ahead of the game. But some folks may not know. And so just for a little background, in the beginning of human society, we had hunters and gatherers, and we're up through agrarian, industrialization, tech, and now we're at the point of what they call Society 5.0, which is social connectivity through technology. Now, all of this is there. We know in history, we know in the social sciences about the advancement of humanity, but the United Nations developed a plan that would have that had a 2030 deadline for humanity. And so the Japanese developed a separate guideline for where we needed to be with benchmarks to get to that plan. And so that's where the Society 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We're supposed to be at 6 now, but we're a little behind. That's where that came from, is their model. In Society 4.0, which you may know about, it's where we had the Internet of Things. Your refrigerator could talk to you and order your food from the grocery store long before we had COVID, pick up at the curb or DoorDash. You had your smartwatch, you had everything that was connected. And that's what Society 4.0 did. It gave you connectivity to everything. The internet was ubiquitous. There were great points of that, there were bad points of that, and we've all come to understand that more clearly because of the COVID pandemic. And as we think about what Society 5.0 is supposed to do for us, which is supposed to bring us into a more socialized community for everything, not just social media, not just school on the internet, not just meetings with organizations or even attending funerals or religious services or whatever. There should be a seamless connectivity for all of society. That's the thought behind it. And the goal is sustainability. We need to make it possible for us to continue. And that's where COVID has taught us a lesson. We have great plans, as these graphics will show you, for automation and delivery of services. We have currently cloud, we all know about the cloud-based this and that and the other, but we're moving even beyond that. We're going into what's called big data and artificial intelligence. And hopefully at the end of the day, if you haven't learned anything else, you'll know those two terms and what they really mean in higher education or how they apply in higher education. Big data is all the information that's being collected by all these connected devices. So it's going somewhere, right? We have databases. We used to have like this database and that database, and now we have all these interconnected databases full of information, and it's being manipulated, and information analysis is being poured back out. Think about the algorithms on social media, for example. How do you get those ads? Big data shows them to you. I searched for something on Google, I get an ad for it on Instagram. It's big data. That's what's pushing that. But we also, in the Society 5.0, need to consider our personal space, our physical space, in connection with all that's going on. And this is just a real quick idea of how big data is. It's literally everything. Everything about our lives is being collected, even though we don't know it. And everybody has opinions. I'm not going to go into that today because it's sort of another topic. But how does that affect us in higher ed? We heard about the blockchain, and blockchain has different meanings from assets like Bitcoin and cyber currency in the data world. A piece of information that is owned by you is a block, and you own that, you control it. So in theory, if you have your digital school record, for example, your students have their records for their classes that they've registered for, the classes they've completed, all of their requirements for graduation. Each of those is a block in the blockchain of big data. And in theory, the students control that. That's going to be an interesting concept down the road. I wanted to show you some of the basic ideas behind what Society 5.0 represents. The biggest one that I want you to see or pay close attention to is we're running behind. And is it all COVID, or are there other things? Is there social pushback? Is there political and economic constrictions, redirections? Is technology not keeping up, or is technology going too fast? And then the other issue that we have in the higher ed world is the sustainability that was defined it literally says to achieve a better quality of life. Nobody knows what that means. It's very personalized again. So what is that? Where are we going with it? And if you have questions or comments, please feel free to put something in the chat. Again, Society 5.0 is supposed to be focused on us as humans, socially connected, which, if you know anything about Indigenous and non-Western education, that social connection is a crucial building block of how learning occurs. The framework of learning in non-Western environments is very social. So we're already geared up for it. They just don't necessarily have the technology. We in the Western environment have technology, but we don't understand social learning on the scale that the non-Western societies do. Well, where are we because of COVID? These are just a few things that we all know. You've got, this may be the pandemic, may be the norm. We may have to be prepared for this. We can't just say, oh, we have a disaster recovery plan. We have to practice it. We can't be caught with our books bags dumping in the river because we don't know what we're going to do, and running around. In the South, we say running around like a chicken with your head cut off, trying to figure out what you're going to do. How are we going to approach this? How are we going to respond? And most higher education facilities had a challenge. They thought they were prepared for anything that came down the pike, but they really weren't. We've all read, we all know what the Chronicle of Higher Ed and many of the other publications tell us, and the Department of Education has kept abreast of this. But what does it mean on our personal levels? Well, it means that we are facing funding shortages. I read an article recently, and I think it was the New York Times, that said that most universities and post-secondary education in general is relying on actual unpaid adjunct faculty. Literally, they do not pay them because the people want to work. They want to make sure that they keep their space in the industry, but they're working for nothing just to keep a job. And that's not something we want to do, right? We want to pay people for their worth. Remote work, I don't know how many of you faced that with your student populations, that they couldn't reach somebody. I saw a young lady come into the library the other day, and she wanted to get some help doing some research for a paper. And she couldn't find a human being in the library to help her because all of the help staff are totally online. Now, there are people working at the registration desk or the checkout desk or different other positions, but the helpers that we used to think of, they're in the reference space, and that's where you send the students. They're all online, and she needed actual physical help. So that's another issue that we're facing, is how do we address those needs of our students? Not everybody can be online and learn efficiently and get their problem solved. And then another huge challenge that COVID has brought to us is we're used to academic freedom and autonomy in our classrooms or our learning spaces. As long as we are meeting the accreditation requirements or any other requirements that are put in place by the department or the institution, we can pretty much do what we want to do to present the material and evaluate. Can we do that now? Because with COVID, we're discovering that there are people who really cannot effectively present in online environments. They probably weren't able to do it before, but since they were thrown into this, it's become more apparent. And what do we do from an institutional standpoint to resolve that problem without being offensive to the instructors, without causing disruption in our departments, and without affecting the students' persistence and retention? The other big challenge that we have in higher ed facing the future is we're having to do simultaneous needs assessment and evaluation. And if you're familiar with the instructional systems design models, evaluation and needs assessment are generally separated. You have a needs assessment and you evaluate throughout the design process, the implementation process, and you have a formal summative evaluation at the end. We don't have the luxury of doing that now. We've got to assess what we've done, where we are, what we expect, while we're trying to figure out what our needs are, and more than anything, how to balance the institutional and the students' needs. And some of the lessons I have in the right-hand column, most schools found out that their technology they thought was great wasn't quite what they expected it to be. They had to scramble to implement services for faculty, staff, and students. Several universities had learning management systems, LMSs, in place, but they hadn't trained their faculty on how to use them efficiently. I talked to a young man a few days ago who came from K through 12 using the Canvas system or something similar to it in his elementary and high school experience. And when he came to the university, he was excited because, hey, they use Canvas. They don't. It's there, it's in place, but his instructors in his department don't utilize it as fully. So he's really disappointed by that. Do you all know what this number means? If you do, do you know how to raise your hand on the little chat or on the icons, the emoticons? This number, got one, good. This number represents the anticipated downturn by the U.S. Department of Education in first enrollments in post-secondary education in the next, I think it's in the next 2 years. I think it's 22% per year or 22% over across the next 2 years, but 22% downturn in first-time enrollments in post-secondary education. That's very shocking, obviously, because our jobs, our livelihoods, our future as educators and higher education professionals absolutely relies on those enrollments. So what do we do to create and implement change? Well, I've got several ideas that are here. We have to evolve. We have to anticipate. We have to reframe. We have to listen, and we have to contain the experience. And all of those things have to be balanced. And in your role as an educator or a higher ed professional, whatever your position is at the school, you need to understand how to balance, how to plug in, how to step outside when necessary and pull others in with you and get information. Probably the hardest part is going to be number 3, restructure, reduce, make sure you have resilience, and reach out. I think because business as usual for in the higher education industry is not what we used to think it was. So I love this term that a gentleman, I've uploaded the article by Curtin, where he suggested that we need to choose, are we going to go hybrid or high flex in the future? And it's not that they can work together, but he said it's a paradigm in our programming, in our organizational structure. Are we just going to mush together face-to-face learning and online learning? Or are we actually going to go into hyperflex mode and make it so that individuals who want to learn can learn in any environment, can learn through our universities, can learn through our certificate programs, can come to us for any kind of learning that they need. And some of the ideas that I got from reading his article were basically we need to reframe our instructional practice. And we think about, oh, well, there's lots of ideas about how to do that. But some of the things that don't get talked about are being consistent and making your instruction personalized. We talk about personalized education and instruction, but we don't do it across the board. We're not consistent in our delivery of personalized information. We need to empower our students, and we may think we're empowering them, but are we really? That's a whole other conversation. Are we being immersive, or are we just giving them bits and pieces? Are we literally throwing them in and letting them dig their way out of the knowledge and skills? Are we really being inclusive? And we may think we are, and we may think we're meeting the DEI requirements for our universities, but are we absolutely truly being inclusive? And I could spend a whole afternoon talking about just that one topic and the things I've observed as a department chair at a 2-year college. I was really surprised. And then the next one is create communities of thought and practice. If you don't know those 2 terms, please look them up and read about them. A community of thought and a community of practice are very similar, but one is thinking, obviously, theorizing, studying about things, sharing information, and a community of practice is approaching and problem solving from the point of view of making it a community activity. Everybody's information and everybody's opinion has value, and you put it all together and you have, a community activity or a community project or a community instruction that works. And I apologize, we just had lunch. And the last one, some of you may understand what this is, maker mentality. If you're not familiar with the term maker, it comes from the idea of people who craft. So I create, I craft, I design, I implement, and I produce a good. And if we approach our education activities, our learning spaces with a maker mentality, we're going to see a difference in how our students respond. So the next part, I've got just some ideas of how to accomplish these things from the institutional level, from the students level, from the activity level. And I thought I'd throw the slides up and see if you all had any comments or any ideas or any thoughts that you'd like to share about your experiences in your world, how you achieved, how you made it through, lessons that you've learned. Does anybody have anything to share? Either in chat or feel free to unmute and speak.
Yeah, I don't know that I have shared so much as like it's a creeping suspicion. You know, especially what you're talking about the landscape of, you know, things that are headed our way in this like traditional sphere, you know, the traditional 18-year-old students, there's going to be a lot less of them. And it's really, I'm coming from the instructional design point of view, but also like with a deep reverence and like love for the instructor's point of view. But what I'm realizing is that's really not enough. There's a respect that maybe is felt, but then there's no collaboration over like how to actually move forward. So what ends up happening is like, oh, well, you know, the people who know technology end up creating policy around technology, and that's informed by all of these really important things like equity and, you know, student-centric practices, but then it doesn't really make it into actual like change. It ends up being like a prescription, kind of like syllabus requirements, instead of having like a syllabus that's good for students. You like check all the boxes. So I think you know what I mean. I put this in chat. The basic question is like, where should policy live, and does it work?
That is excellent. And I'm glad you shared that, because that goes very closely to the heart of what I'm trying to achieve with this presentation. One of the challenges that we've got is we still unfortunately have the ivory tower mentality too many places in academia. I know we're evolving. I know we're in a post everything environment, but we still have that. They're still present, and that is there. And it's actually more from the outside stakeholders, like the community donors, the accreditation bodies, like in Tennessee, we have the Tennessee Board of Regents and the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. Those folks seem to be stuck in the ivory tower mode more than our newer faculty members and our newer instructional design folks. And one of the things that I've wondered personally, just because I've worked in the two-year college and career technical end of things for many years, is how much benefit would there be if we, instead of just having a Center for Teaching Excellence or a Teaching and Learning Institute at the universities that have them, if we create a mentorship within departments between not just new faculty, but the experienced tenured faculty, try to move them to the middle of what would be effective for the students, and hopefully address exactly the situations that you're describing. Does anyone else? Oh, does anyone else have a comment or question? I will share with you, Casey, and everyone else, that is probably the hardest thing that we face in the career and technical world that I live in. They bring in, so the subject matter experts come in and teach. They may know everything there is to know about building a diesel engine, but they don't know anything about teaching adults. They don't know anything about the cognitive process. They don't know anything about any of that. And my role as the department chair is to evaluate them as instructors and give them quick ideas and quick fixes. And it just doesn't work. And unfortunately, I see that still in traditional higher education, in the two-year colleges. And I'm not knocking two-year colleges necessarily, but the two-year colleges and the proprietary colleges, the skills-based colleges, training programs, they're not keeping up with what students actually need to live in the future. And COVID hopefully will give them the opportunity to say, gee, we need to catch up. I hope. I have great faith. Another thing that we need to do moving forward is we need to reimagine what online actually means. And if you're in the instructional design world, you're there. You know what the tech is of the future. But how do you express that to other people at your university or your institution? How do you make them aware of how to implement this and go out and get it funded? That's probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks that we already had before the COVID pandemic, was getting funding, getting grants written. People, for some reason, don't think outside the box when it comes to asking for money. So I'm hoping that we can grow out of our COVID experience where we had to scramble to find money to fund things and say, you know, my next door neighbor knows a guy who might know a guy, and do some networking that way and ask for money. Because if you don't ask, it's not going to come. We also need to make sure that our learning management systems are in place and being used. And every opportunity that we have, we need to encourage your instructors to gamify their learning, not just the flipped classrooms, not just the active learning, interactive activities on Padlet or that sort of thing, but literally gamify the learning, give them badges. Let them challenge each other. The interesting trend that I see in the literature is that, not in education literature, but in CTE literature, career technical education literature, and child psychology literature, is that the kids who are going to be coming in, say in the next 10 years, are becoming screen worn out. They're tired of screens, because they've had school for 2 years on screens. They've always had their game system screens, but now they're being forced to use screens to learn, and they're not real happy children. So I'm going to be interested to see where that takes us in the future of learning design. Another thing to encourage your institutions to do, if you don't know what SaaS means, it's software as a service. And that's things like Microsoft 365 that you use online, or Adobe applications. A lot of universities don't license what your students and your instructors actually need to deliver the instruction and the learning that needs to occur. So make sure that somebody is doing an inventory and saying, hey, you know what? It'd be great if we had an institutional license for this. It's $1,000 a year. It's not very expensive. My department can come up with the money. We'll get, the Kroger Foundation or somebody to pay for it. Just go out and ask, make a pitch. And probably the biggest thing is at the bottom. Remember that our users are humans and they are going to have needs. From the student development standpoint, this is a really big list of things that we can move into the future from our COVID experience. We have got to cultivate students' potential, and we've got to cultivate potential students. We have to find our students' strong points and engage them as stewards for either mentoring fellow students or serving on fact-finding committees. However we can encourage them to participate. We need to make them aware of their abilities, and making them is the hard part. We're not really forcing them, we're just leading them. I'm sorry I used the word make, because we're not supposed to make anymore. But we need to move them into change making. We need to market to senior citizens. Many organizations fail to do that. At the state of Tennessee, once you hit the age of 65, you can attend for credit classes for $7 a semester hour. $7. So you could go full time for $63 on a 9-hour class load, $63. And you wouldn't believe how many senior citizens do not know that exists. So I'm out there just like constantly saying, you should go to college, do this. You've always wanted to go to college. So maybe your state has that and nobody's actually pushing it. Because you know what happens? Seniors become your great mentors and your great the folks who can go out and make the asks when you need the asks on the street. Develop some shorter term lessons. It's in the instructional design world and the other side of education, not just the traditional 16-week higher education semester. We have micro-credentialing, and that's becoming a thing. And we have certificate programs that may last, you go to school for 6 weeks or 8 weeks and you get a certificate of completion for a specific task or a specific skill or specific knowledge. Explore that from the standpoint of your undergraduates and your graduate students, not just people out in the community that you want to draw back in. Again, with the entrepreneurial and maker focus spirit, if you can engage your students in the mindset of being an entrepreneur, it will change their worlds. I promise you. And this immediately takes us back to what we've learned from COVID. We have to be entrepreneurs in our own lives. The world is out there. We have structure in place, but we have to figure out things on our own, and we have to be proactive and responsible for ourselves. Then we think we have safety and wellness and inclusion in our curricula, culturally responsive curriculum, lots of other features of everyday curriculum in our schools, but are they actually there? Do we talk about it? Do we promote it? Do we make the students feel that those things are present? Because for the Society 5.0, that's going to matter. Society 6.0 is going to bring this social experience of learning that Society 5.0 has focused on and make everything personal. It's going to bring it back from out in the world to me. So we, as stewards of the Society 5.0, we need to think on those terms. How do we prepare to bring it back to the individuals? And then the last one says survey, even if you just get likes and dislikes, survey everything and use that big data, because you'll be surprised at how much you'll learn. And you know what you do? You engage your students at the school in collecting the data and analyzing it and putting it into use. For learning activities, there's some ideas that we've gotten from online remote learning through the COVID experience. If you don't know what a flipped learning space is, it's basically all the reading and all the background information is done first, and you come into the classroom and you engage in activities that enhance what you've already learned outside the classroom. So it's different from just a straight lecture like so many online classrooms have become. I hear students all the time talk about how much they hate seeing somebody's back on their Zoom. So they're not engaged. They don't have to. The instructor's back is turned. So with flipped learning, you don't have as much of that. The other challenge that we have with remote learning today is how do we engage every learning style? And that is a tremendous challenge with online learning. So think about your learning activities. How can I make it tactile? How can I make it oral? How can I make it visual? How can I make it something that is a problem-solving activity that's independent for those who need independent learning? It's very challenging, even at the graduate level, when you're required to work in teams and you maybe are on the Asperger's spectrum, and you don't want to talk about that. You don't want to share that personally, but it's part of your life. And one of the requirements is that you have to be on a group, in a team or in a group project. That should not occur online. It would have been acceptable to opt out in the face-to-face classroom. But one of the challenges of online is instructors assume they have to keep you engaged. They have to peep in at your breakout sessions. They have to make sure you're participating, and these are the ways they work around it. Instructors don't have a lot of empathy sometimes, and so that's something that we need to work on. And I've got gamify again, because that is just such a huge thing, gamification. We need to routinely evaluate the instruction. And that's not just the instructors, it's literally talk to the students 3 months in, or 3 weeks in, not at midterm. Do it at 3 weeks and say, how are you doing in this class? Up, thumbs down, 5 words, whatever you can share. And then take corrective measures, because if students see that we're proactive, they will be thrilled. And then finally, we need to harness big data. And here are some options. If you aren't harnessing big data as an instructor, as an instructional designer, as a higher education professional in whatever role you hold, if you're not doing this from within the data that's available to you from your students, from your faculty, from your donor population, from your alumni, you're really losing out, because we have to have this to leverage and move forward. Otherwise, we're just going to be spinning our wheels. And I thought I'd end with learning is everywhere and everything is learning. That is what Society 5.0 is about. I hope you've figured that out. I hope your students have figured that out. I hope your contemporaries have figured that out, and that you're looking forward to sharing the learning of the future. And then I thought I'd ask again, does anyone have ideas, experiences, anything you'd like to share? Has anything struck you as, oh, that's a light bulb moment for me? Not putting folks on the spot, I understand.
Well,
Are there? Oh,
just now,
yes, ma'am.
actually, it gave me like a light bulb where I'm like, okay, so I do work at a community college, and obviously a lot of our students are transfer students. And I'm like, do we ask them, like, once they're in the next place, like, were you ready? And I'm wondering if that data is somewhere that we can have access to, or if it's some, some funnel that we could create to get that information.
If you don't have an evaluation system in place, put one in place. The individuals in our 4.0 society and moving into 5.0 society, whether they're adults, learners in the workplace, wherever, we're used to being asked to thumbs up or thumbs down, or give a little feedback or whatever. It's what we do in social media. It's what we do at the grocery store. We say, how did you like this, up or down? It's something we're used to doing routinely. And so if you have a little app with a little survey that you can pop up and say, how's your day going, up or down? Do you feel lost, up or down? Is there anything you need help with, up or down? If you get the downs or ups or whatever your answer is that sparks the follow-up, you can follow up with them if you're tracking, or if you're not tracking them, you can ask, give them, like if your survey is built so that it gives feedback and prompting. If somebody gives you the thumbs down about how they feel today, you could prompt with, hey, you have this service available to you, and here's the link, and make it available. Every department in every university, instructional, academic, administrative, whatever, should have app developers, not just the university's app developers, but you need your own, and go out and get some student who is excited about this and help them, or have them help you develop some apps. Then you just, I'm sure if you're at a big enough university where you have the huge lecture halls, you've got the QR code where the students hit their phone when they go in to check their attendance for the day, right? It's that easy. QR code, how's everything going? Up, down, well, here's a response. And that's engaging to them. Anybody else have an idea or a thought? Well, I appreciate your being here. And I'm glad the internet stayed up. There are tornadoes and things have calmed down, or tornado watches and the weather have calmed down. Again, please check the Discord, I'm going to say this wrong, Discord site if you'd like to download my presentation and the articles that I recommended. And feel free to email if you have any suggestions, if you have any questions. I love to read and share information, so I look forward to following up.
Thank you.
Thanks, Billie. And we have a couple of minutes here if anyone wants to stay on and pose questions. Otherwise, I'll just stop recording now, but we do have a few minutes if anyone wants to ask questions or continue the discussion.